Something that dawned on me as I was building this, and I didn't count on this at the beginning, is I could, coding here, so there is, this idea of I could have a subprogram or a subroutine that determines thrust. And all of a sudden, this looks a lot more similar to this. And actually, I'm not at end here, am I? I should be back to here. All right, so this, and maybe even I could take this out, right? The idea being I can make this flowchart look a lot like this one and then offset this other bit. I would technically need another thing like here too. So now, if we take a look at the flowchart, at a high level, just looking at this, I can start to see, okay, these are similar. How do you feel about that?
Indeed, they look pretty much identical. Very, very nice. So then you can see exactly where we've added the logic that helps us to control the thrust.
And one of the things I like about this is it can drive the conversation. If at the beginning we had said, okay, we want to, let me zoom back in here, set the thrust to 3 unless the B speed is greater than 4. If we're just looking at our old code, we're like, okay, well, where are we going to do that? And then somebody might be able to say, oh yeah, right in here. We're going to do all this other stuff pretty much the same way, but we're going to do that right in here. And then our first step can be, okay, so let's determine thrust, whatever that means, right? We're going to build that flow chart out. And then all of a sudden I have this, it's probably going to be pretty close to right. I have to remember to come back here and change my hard-coded numbers to output thrust.
Mm-hmm.
But then I can start to build this out and it becomes, like you said, more and more clear that other things are the same. And this is the only area I need to change. And for veteran programmers, that might be obvious. But for a lot of programmers, I don't think it necessarily would be, because when I take a look at that old one, it looked a lot different to me, right? If I were to have this on an 8.5 sheet by 11 sheet of paper and take a look at both of them, just visually, they look a lot different. Whereas if I can see these two things, and then on another 8.5 by 11, I had this guy. Initially, I'm like, oh yeah, it's practically the same.
Yep.
So I think if we're comfortable with it, and this is maybe, I don't know how advanced flow charting people are familiar with, I'm going to leave it like this, because I think as we get with more complexity, these kinds of things help to simplify in my mind. And again, I sometimes think it's because I can't hold enough in my brain at once. I need things to be just, my dad said, stupid simple. But it just helps me when there are fewer opportunities to make mistakes.
Nice. I like the visual a lot, and I definitely see the value of going through the process of the flow charting instead of going directly into coding, which I tend to have a tendency to do.
Sure. And there's
Yeah.
good reason for it, right? And however long these videos are, it's probably not going to take somebody that long to program all of these, but going through these steps, maybe without as much conversation in the whys and wheres, I think is super helpful. And certainly I absolutely do these kinds of things on more complex applications. And especially kind of this, right? Being able to take a look at a chunk of code and say, this code does X, right? This code determines thrust. That's all it does. Nothing more than that, nothing less than that. And the more I can kind of package up these, I think of them kind of as Lego pieces, I can then put them together to create a solution. So that's a long way of saying I like it too.
Excellent.
So I think we're ready to jump in and turn this into code, yeah?
Let's do it.
All right. So in the next video, let's write some code.